Well, hello and welcome back to the Anglican Hope video channel, part of the Anglican Network in Europe. We're here to provide a hope for the future as we cling to the Lord Jesus Christ and know that he is a sure and steadfast anchor for our souls. Whether there are storms raging around us, whatever's going on, we know that the Lord Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, of course, there are stormy seas in the Anglican Communion at the moment, and that's led many to question what the future might hold for them and for the church. And we're here today to share stories from across our network of how the Lord Jesus Christ has provided a home for faithful Anglicans as they choose the often costly but the right and good choice to stand firm for him. I'm joined today by the Revd Mike Walton, pastor of Cornerstone Church in Grays, and he's going to be sharing a little bit of his story. Mike, whereabouts are you based? Tell us a little bit about Grays and how you've ended up serving the Lord there.
Hi, I'm Mike Walton. Yes, Grays, many people are aware of the Dartford crossing on the M25. So if we're just north of the River Thames, sort of 10 minutes further out of London from the Dartford crossing, past Lakeside Shopping Centre. That's the other landmark that some people have heard of. So yeah, and I live here with my wife and 3 children. And I'm part-time pastor of Cornerstone Church Grays, and I've been serving that way for the last 3 years.
Fantastic. Now, I believe you started out in ministry within the Church of England, Mike, but it came to a point where you felt uncomfortable, kind of carrying on in that context. You just share a little bit of, I guess, what led to the decision to both leave the Church of England, but then also to start a new church within the Anglican mission in England.
Yeah. So leaving the Church of England, some of my friends might laugh at this, but I'm a sensitive soul. But I was struggling with the Church of England on a number of fronts. And I think the main thing was actually the Church of England is just not famous for the gospel. In proclaiming Jesus Christ clearly. Clearly, there are faithful churches within the Church of England, and we rejoice in that. There was then, and there still is now. But actually, took it as I was looking at the Church of England as a whole, whether it was at the bishops or some of the things happening in General Synod, or just actually my own diocese, I was just becoming more and more convinced. Actually, the Church of England wasn't a basket of good apples with a few bad apples in it. It was actually becoming a basket of bad apples with a few good apples in it. And so if you start coming to that conclusion that the denomination is not being faithful to Christ as a whole, as I was reading the Bible, to me, it seems clear that we're told that we have nothing to do with false teachers and false teaching. And for me, that seemed that I had to leave. I couldn't see how I could remain within a structure because I would be having lots to do with them, I'm afraid. So that's a decision I came to actually 18 months before we left, actually. So that was back in 2018. So yeah.
Now, of course, we know that different people will come to different conclusions about how they need to respond to those challenges that you described there, Mike. Having kind of come to that point, actually, where in your conscience and in your heart you couldn't continue to minister there, what did the process look like from there? You kind of describe about an 18-month process from kind of coming to that conclusion. What kind of conversations were you having? What kind of path did you plot, having kind of come to that decision yourself?
Yeah. So deciding to leave, but that doesn't automatically decide what you're going to do next. So for us, it was a case of do we start a new church locally? Do I go and be a teacher, or go back to IT, what I used to work in, or perhaps do I go and work in another denomination in an existing denomination, take on another job as a pastor elsewhere? And that sort of decision doesn't happen overnight. It's something that my wife and I had to pray over, chat over, but also chat to other people who we trusted in our sort of localish area, and then also chatting to Amy as well about, especially when thinking whether a new church plant was a possibility. Started chatting to them as well. So And because actually our context, where we were ministering before, it's not a wealthy area, and the church we were serving wasn't a particularly big church either. So it was very clear from the outset, if we were going to plant a church, that we would have to have how would we fund it. And so one of the things we decided, even before we made the final decision, was my wife would train to be a teacher, so she could be the main breadwinner, basically. All that was happening in that 18-month period, as we gradually came clearer and clearer that actually the church plant seemed to be the right way forward.
Yeah. Now, I guess for many folk, that question of funding and resources is a significant one as they think about stepping out of a structure where there's quite a bit of security in some ways. Just talk to us about kind of the emotions of that and how you grappled with the idea of leaving a kind of stable job with a steady income, a house, and all those kind of things. How did you feel about that, and how did you move forward with that as you were thinking about this move?
The burden, so one of the big downsides of having a sort of that 18-month plan, thinking, praying period, and actually the only people in the church family who knew were the church wardens, so they were aware, but no one else in the church family, because we didn't want it to dominate church life for such a long time, and we didn't know it was going to take 18 months, but it was obviously not going to be a few months. So it was a real burden to carry that. We're planning to leave, and what's next, and the impact on the church family and things like that. And there was a real cost personally in that. And in terms of the finances, you just have to be realistic and be ready to take up your cross and to have some difficult decisions. I remember one meeting we had when we did say that we were leaving to the church family, and if anyone would like to come, they'd be very welcome. But there was no answer, and we were very careful how we went about that. But we had what became the launch team in our front room, and we were talking money, and we had set a budget for the first year of £16,000. And this small team of people, they were horrified. How are we going to be able to raise that amount of money? They were really shocked, and but wonderfully, actually, by the time we started, there was pledges covering that, and actually we had more came in. We even had some money coming from a contact of a contact from Singapore. It was very strange. It was a friend of a friend who heard about us, and they just gave a lump sum. So it was astonishing, really.
That's amazing, isn't it? That the Lord provides, and he is able to provide as we step out, as we trust him, as we seek to do his will. And we hear stories time and again across the Anglican Network in Europe of how the Lord has provided in incredible and unexpected ways time and time again. So if you were kind of talking to someone who is in that position at the moment, who's really thinking through, can I take this step? What would you want to say to them? Because we know there are many who are grappling in very really with the with that kind of question at the moment.
Yeah, one of the things I found it really valuable being able to talk to some friends who were familiar with our context, who are in ministry elsewhere, getting their thoughts, getting their prayers, as we thought about the church plans. You want to be very realistic. Is this about actually God wanting to start something new, or is it about Mike Walton wanting to lead a church? Because you don't want it. For me, I didn't want it to be the second, because that's not a good basis. So having those conversations with guys locally, men and women locally, and their prayers and wisdom was really important. And then actually with Amy as well, I was very encouraged that when we were talking to Amy and it was becoming like this could be a serious possibility, that they actually took the select, actually whether they would support and then whether we would be an Amy church or not, they took that very seriously. And I had a 24-hour interview, and people came to stay with me and my family, and it wasn't an automatic, just because you're a clear evangelical, that you'll be that you're necessarily the right match with Amy. And I found that was really helpful and encouraging that was being taken seriously. So yeah, and just being ready, just trying to be honest with yourself about actually, if a church plant isn't going to be the thing, am I ready just to go and get a job in a normal situation and get stuck into a church where I can be serving the gospel, but not as a paid member of staff, and being open to that possibility, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that's really hard, isn't it? Because I think when we've been involved in ministry for a while, actually it becomes part of, or it can, certainly the danger is, becomes part of our identity. And so actually having to grapple with some of the heart issues around that. Why am I taking the next step in the way that I'm taking it? But as you say, I think the selection processes for both of our convocations, for the Anglican convocation in Europe and for the Anglican mission in England, are very robust and thorough. So for anyone who's wanting to explore that, by all means do get in touch, and someone will be able to talk you through what that kind of process might look like. But it certainly isn't just if someone wants to plant a church, here you go, off you go, we'll crack on with it. There's very much lots of conversation, lots of interaction to make sure that this is a right fit for both you and for the network as well. What would you say have been the kind of main lessons, Mike, that the Lord has taught you and the church there in Grace through all of this?
Yeah. Here we go. This is a confession time. My own pride, my own sin, really has been a huge one. So when we started Cornerstone, I was working part-time for the church. I was working part-time in a school as well as a tent maker. And because my wife was now a new full-time teacher, I was taking on the majority of the stuff at home. And I was putting too much pressure on myself and not enough pressure on Jesus. So weight that should have been on his shoulders, I put on my shoulders. And partially that was because of the sinful fear that if Cornerstone Church fails, and some church plants will not always work out, and we've got to be realistic about that, I think. But I was fearful of, if it does fail, what that makes it look like for me. I'm a failed church planter, and the idea of having that label was something I didn't want. And that's sinful. It's pride. I'm being honest here. It's wrong of me. But I was talking to some other people who've been church planters, and it's a fear that any church planter has. So I'm not trying to say that makes it all right, because it's not. But it is common. But I probably let it get too much, because I ended up burning out and being off work for 3 months, and then having another 9 months of slowly getting back into work. So yeah, that was a major lesson. So again, that's watch your own heart and be ready for things in church life. We had COVID hit 2 weeks after we properly launched the first lockdown. So we had some unique circumstances, but be ready to only do what you can do and not try to put more pressure on yourself than that. You shouldn't be putting that pressure on yourself at all. But if it means certain policies in your church life aren't quite as good as you want them to be, let them be. There's some things you just need to put on the back burner, which you would prefer not to, perhaps, but you still be realistic about that. So really, that was a major lesson for me along the way. And I think just how God has, because as I say, I was out of action to varying degrees for nearly a year, to varying degrees, and just actually, the elders at the church and the rest of the church family, how God sustains them, sustained the church family. And again, we so easily put it's all down to the gospel minister, and it's rubbish, because we know theologically that's not true, but we can so easily end up in that place. And God has given people with gifts in the church family, and it's good for them to use them.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you were reflecting on when we were preparing for this interview was just about the need to lead as a leader as well, and be willing to put yourself forward and to take people with you on these kind of big issues. What has the Lord kind of taught you about leading through what is an incredibly difficult choice when you take that step out into the unknown of planting a new church, launching off. What have you learned about that?
Yeah, it's taking counsel as widely as possible and prayer, but ultimately you do have to make the decision. You can't. I couldn't wait for my church wardens to say to me, Mike, go on, I think you should lead the church, or you should start a church plant. It was a case of, because they don't feel like they can say that to me, because actually, who's gonna bear the brunt of the cost of leaving? Actually, it was me and my family. So, and it wouldn't have been fair to put that on them. So actually, yes, take wide counsel, etc., pray, but ultimately you do have to just make the decision, and then go for it, knowing it's a risk, and knowing that it might all fall flat on its face, and if it does, God will have used it for His purposes and His reasons, and yeah.
Absolutely, knowing that the Lord is abundantly faithful, and you've testified to that, Mike, so clearly, and we're so grateful for your willingness to share with us today, so openly, so honestly, about both the Lord's goodness, but also actually your own struggles, the pridefulness of your own heart, and I think that's right in all these situations. That the Lord is wanting to grow us, isn't He? As much as He's wanting to grow His church through this, He wants to grow us as well. So thank you so much for just sharing all of that with us today, Mike. Now, if anyone is wanting to get in touch, wanting to find out more about the Anglican Network in Europe or our convocations, you can email us at info@anglicannetwork.org. There's lots of information on our website, anglicannetwork.org. Do log on to there, and you can find out all sorts of information about how we can be supporting you, how we're praying for you, and how our bishops would love to be looking out for you at this time. Thanks again, and we'll see you again soon.